Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and discovering that competition no longer exists. No company trying to beat another company. No entrepreneur trying to build something better. No restaurant trying to serve better food. No technology company racing to create the next breakthrough. No one fighting for customers. No one trying to improve. At first, that world might sound peaceful. Less stress, less pressure, less conflict. But within a few years, something strange would happen. Innovation would slow down. Prices would rise. Quality would fall. Progress would almost disappear. Because whether people realize it or not, competition is one of the most powerful forces ever discovered. In fact, competition may be the invisible engine behind nearly every modern convenience you enjoy today. Your smartphone exists because companies competed. Your internet became faster because companies competed. Your car became safer because companies competed. Your groceries became cheaper because companies competed. Even the city you live in today looks the way it does because of competition. And nowhere has competition shaped society more dramatically than in America. Many people believe America's rise was caused by natural resources. Others believe it was caused by geography. Some point to technology. Others point to capitalism. But underneath all those explanations lies a deeper force. A force that quietly pushed individuals, companies, industries, and entire generations to become better. Competition. The story begins long before Silicon Valley, long before Wall Street, long before giant corporations dominated headlines. To understand modern America, you must first understand a simple truth. Human beings rarely improve when improvement is optional. Think about it. If you owned the only bakery in town, would you wake up every morning trying to bake better bread? Maybe. But what if another bakery opened across the street? Suddenly everything changes. Now customers have a choice. If your bread isn't fresh, they leave. If your service is poor, they leave. If your prices are too high, they leave. The moment people gain alternatives, competition begins. And once competition begins, improvement becomes necessary. Now imagine that principle applied not to a bakery, but to an entire nation. America's economic story is really the story of millions of competitive battles happening simultaneously. Company versus company, inventor versus inventor, city versus city, state versus state, idea versus idea. Every day, every year, for generations. And those battles created extraordinary results. Consider transportation. 200 years ago, traveling across America was slow, dangerous, and expensive. Moving goods from one place to another could take weeks. Entire communities remained isolated. Economic growth was limited by distance. Then competition entered the picture. Railroad companies began competing. They raced to build tracks faster. They raced to connect more cities. They raced to attract more customers. Each company wanted to move people and goods more efficiently than its rivals. The result? Transportation costs collapsed. Trade expanded. Businesses grew. Entire regions became connected. The country became wealthier. But here's what's fascinating. The railroad owners weren't trying to make America richer. They were trying to beat competitors. Yet their pursuit of victory created benefits for millions of people. This pattern would repeat again and again throughout American history. The automobile industry tells a similar story. Imagine America before cars, cities filled with horses, roads covered in mud, travel limited by distance and time. Then entrepreneurs saw opportunity. Suddenly dozens of automobile companies emerged. Not one, not two, dozens. Each one believed it could build a better vehicle, a faster vehicle, a cheaper vehicle, a more reliable vehicle. Most failed. A few survived. But together they transformed transportation forever. Competition forced innovation. Innovation reduced costs. Lower costs expanded access. Expanded access created growth. The cycle continued. Then came one of the greatest competitive battles in modern history. The battle for the American consumer. This battle changed everything, because eventually companies realized something important. The winner wasn't necessarily the company that worked hardest. The winner was often the company that created the most value. Think about what happens when two companies want the same customer. One lowers prices, the other improves quality. One creates better service, the other develops new features. One invests in technology, the other invests in efficiency. Customers benefit from all of it. This creates a remarkable situation. Companies compete for profit, but consumers receive much of the reward. Every industry becomes a race to become faster, cheaper, smarter, more efficient. And over time, those improvements accumulate. 1% better becomes 10% better. 10% becomes 100%. Entire industries transform. Now imagine this process happening simultaneously across thousands of industries. Retail, manufacturing, technology, healthcare, finance, transportation, energy, construction, agriculture, communication, everywhere, at all times. That's exactly what happened in America. And while most people rarely notice these invisible battles, their lives are shaped by them every single day. But competition doesn't just improve products, it improves people. Imagine two students preparing for the same scholarship. Both know only one can win. What happens? They study harder, learn faster, push themselves further. Competition creates effort. Effort creates improvement. Improvement creates results. The same principle applies to entrepreneurs. Founders know competitors are coming. Investors know opportunities are limited. Employees know performance matters. Entire ecosystems become focused on progress. This is one reason America became such a powerful center of innovation. The system continuously rewarded those who improved, not those who stayed comfortable, not those who stayed still, but those who moved forward. And nowhere was this more visible than in the rise of Silicon Valley. Because Silicon Valley wasn't built by cooperation alone, it was built by intense competition. Competition between startups, competition between engineers, competition between investors, competition between technologies. Everyone wanted to build the future first. Everyone wanted to create the next breakthrough. Everyone wanted to win. And when thousands of ambitious people compete to build the future arrives much faster. Yet competition has a dark side too, because not everyone wins. For every successful company, hundreds disappear. For every billionaire founder, thousands fail. For every breakthrough, countless experiments collapse. Competition creates winners, but it also creates losers, and that reality makes many people uncomfortable. However, here's the critical insight. The goal of competition is not to guarantee success. The goal is to discover excellence, and excellence often emerges from repeated trial and error. Imagine planting 1,000 seeds. Most never grow. Some grow slowly. A few become giant trees. The forest becomes stronger because the strongest growth survives. America's competitive system often works in a similar way. Thousands of ideas compete. Thousands of businesses compete. Thousands of innovations compete. Most disappear. A few transform the world. And those few successes generate enormous wealth. But the most important chapter of this story was still ahead, because eventually a new battlefield emerged, a battlefield unlike anything humanity had ever seen before. Not on land, not at sea, not in factories, but inside computers. The digital revolution was about to turn competition into something even more powerful, and the companies that understood this first would help build the modern America we know today. But then, something happened that changed the rules forever. For most of history, competition had physical limits. A company could only grow so fast. A store could only serve so many customers. A factory could only produce so many products. Distance mattered. Geography mattered. Infrastructure mattered. Then the internet arrived, and suddenly, competition became global. Imagine owning a small bookstore in the 1980s. Your competitors are nearby. Maybe a few stores across town, maybe a regional chain, nothing more. Now imagine waking up one morning and discovering that a company thousands of miles away can sell books to your customers. instantly, at lower prices, with greater selection, without opening a store in your city. That's exactly what happened. The internet removed barriers. And once barriers disappeared, competition exploded. The companies that adapted survived. The companies that resisted struggled. The companies that ignored the change disappeared. This is where one of the greatest competitive battles in modern history begins. A battle between old systems and new systems. A battle between tradition and innovation. A battle that would eventually create trillions of dollars in wealth. At first, almost nobody took the internet seriously. Many experts dismissed it. Many businesses ignored it. Many investors laughed at it. They saw computers. They saw websites. But they couldn't see the future. Meanwhile, a small group of entrepreneurs saw something different. They saw opportunity, unlimited opportunity, because they understood a simple truth. When competition expands, the rewards for winning become much larger. One of those entrepreneurs looked at the internet and asked a strange question. What if people bought books online? Today, that sounds obvious. At the time, it sounded ridiculous. Why would anyone order books from a computer? Why wait for delivery? Why trust a website? Most people thought it would fail. But that's what makes competition fascinating. The biggest opportunities often look ridiculous at first. The entrepreneur wasn't competing against one bookstore. He was competing against every bookstore. At the same time, the challenge seemed impossible, but technology changed the equation. And when technology changes the equation, entire industries change. The same thing happened in communication. For centuries, communication was slow. Letters took days, sometimes weeks, sometimes months. Then telephones arrived, then mobile phones, then email, then instant messaging, then social media. Each innovation triggered new competition, and each wave of competition pushed communication forward faster. Companies raced to connect people, race after race, year after year. The result? Today, a message can travel across the planet in seconds, a capability that would have seemed magical to previous generations. But competition wasn't just transforming communication. It was transforming information itself. Imagine being alive before search engines. You need information, maybe for school, maybe for work, maybe for a business decision. Finding answers could take hours, sometimes days. Then technology companies entered a fierce race. Who could organize information better? Who could find answers faster? Who could create the most useful search experience? Millions of users became judges. Every click mattered. Every second mattered. Every improvement mattered. The winners gained more users. More users attracted more advertisers. More advertisers generated more revenue. More revenue funded more innovation. The cycle accelerated. Again, and again, and again. This is one of the hidden powers of competition. Success creates resources. Resources create innovation. Innovation creates better products. Better products create more success. The cycle feeds itself. Over time, the gap between leaders and followers grows larger. But here's where things become really interesting. Because competition isn't only about companies, it's also about cities. Think about American cities. New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Dallas, Miami, Austin, Seattle, San Francisco. Each city competes, not with weapons, not with armies, but with opportunities. Cities compete for talent. Cities compete for businesses. Cities compete for investment. Cities compete for innovation. Imagine you're starting a company. Where do you go? You look for opportunities. Lower costs, better infrastructure, more customers, more investors, more talent. Cities know this. That's why they continuously try to improve. Because attracting one major company can transform an entire region. Thousands of jobs, billions of dollars, new businesses, new development, new growth. Competition doesn't stop at the corporate level. It shapes geography itself. Entire cities evolve because they are competing for the future. And nowhere is this more visible than Silicon Valley. Most people think Silicon Valley became successful because of technology. Technology helped. But technology alone wasn't enough. The real secret was concentration. Imagine placing thousands of ambitious entrepreneurs in one location, then add thousands of engineers, then thousands of investors, then thousands of researchers, then thousands of dreamers. Now make them compete, not politely, aggressively, relentlessly, every day, every year, for decades. What happens? Innovation accelerates because everyone learns from everyone. Everyone challenges everyone. Everyone pushes everyone. One breakthrough inspires another. One startup inspires another. One success story creates hundreds more. Eventually, the ecosystem becomes self-sustaining. The future starts arriving faster. This is one reason modern America became so powerful. Competition wasn't isolated. It became concentrated. Clusters of innovation emerged, and those clusters produced extraordinary results. But perhaps the most intense competition of all happened inside the technology industry, because technology follows a unique rule. Small advantages become huge advantages. Imagine two companies. One builds software that's 5% better. At first, the difference seems tiny, but millions of users choose the better product. More users generate more revenue. More revenue funds more innovation. More innovation attracts more users. The lead grows, then grows again, then grows again. Eventually, one company dominates. Technology markets often reward winners dramatically, and that creates enormous incentives, because the reward for being first can be extraordinary. Billions, sometimes trillions. This reality triggered some of the fiercest competitive battles ever witnessed. Companies fought to build faster computers, faster internet, better software, smarter devices, more powerful platforms. The competition never stopped. And because it never stopped, innovation never stopped. But here's something many people misunderstand. Competition isn't just about defeating rivals. It's about solving problems. The companies that win usually solve problems better. The entrepreneur who wins usually serves customers better. The innovation that wins usually creates more value. In other words, competition forces people to focus on usefulness. Imagine creating a product nobody wants. It doesn't matter how hard you worked. It doesn't matter how much money you spent. The market doesn't care. Customers decide. And customers are brutally honest. They reward value. They ignore everything else. That's why competition acts like a giant filter. Every day, millions of consumers vote with their wallets. Every purchase is a decision. Every decision sends a signal, and those signals shape the economy. The products people love survive. The products people ignore disappear. This process may seem chaotic, but over time it becomes remarkably effective, because it constantly directs resources toward what people actually want. And that's exactly what happened in America. Millions of competitive decisions, millions of market signals, millions of experiments working together, year after year, decade after decade, slowly building one of the most productive economies in human history. Yet the story was far from over, because another competitive revolution was approaching, a revolution that would be even bigger than the internet, even bigger than smartphones, even bigger than social media. A revolution already beginning to reshape industries, already changing jobs, already transforming economies. Artificial intelligence, and once again, competition would determine who leads the future. The race had already begun. Governments were entering. Corporations were entering, startups were entering, investors were entering, the world's smartest engineers were entering. Everyone wanted to build the future first, because history had already taught them something important. In America, the companies that win the biggest competitions often help shape the next era of wealth, and the next battle was only getting started. The race had already begun, not a race for land, not a race for oil, not a race for gold, but a race for intelligence itself. For most of history, economic power came from physical resources. The countries with fertile land became wealthy. The countries with strategic trade routes became powerful. The countries with factories dominated industries. But something changed. The modern economy became increasingly driven by ideas, and ideas compete differently. Imagine two countries. Both have access to the same information, the same technology, the same scientific knowledge. What determines who wins? The answer is surprisingly simple. Who can innovate faster? Who can adapt faster? Who can solve problems faster? Competition became a race of minds. And America happened to build one of the most competitive idea-generating systems in history. Think about the world's most valuable companies. Many don't produce oil. Many don't mine gold. Many don't own massive factories. Instead, they create knowledge, software, platforms, algorithms, networks, ideas. And once ideas become the primary resource, competition accelerates dramatically because ideas can move at the speed of light. A breakthrough made in California can influence Europe tomorrow. A discovery made in Texas can affect Asia next week. A startup founded in a garage can become a global giant within a decade. This is why modern competition looks different from anything humanity has ever experienced. The battlefield is no longer physical, it's intellectual, and nowhere is that more obvious than in artificial intelligence. Imagine being an entrepreneur today. You know AI could transform entire industries: healthcare, finance, education, transportation, manufacturing, entertainment. You know billions of dollars are at stake, maybe trillions. What do? You move fast, very fast, because every competitor is moving too. Every company knows the same thing. The winner could shape the future. This creates enormous pressure. But pressure creates progress. Competition creates urgency. Urgency creates innovation. Innovation creates growth. The cycle repeats once again. This pattern has appeared throughout American history. First railroads, then automobiles, then aviation, then telecommunications, then computers, then the internet, then smartphones, now artificial intelligence. Every generation experiences a new competitive frontier, and every frontier creates new opportunities. But competition alone isn't enough, because innovation needs fuel. And in America, that fuel has always been capital. Imagine you're a brilliant engineer. You have an incredible idea, a breakthrough technology, a revolutionary product, a solution to a major problem. The idea is valuable. But ideas alone don't build companies. You need money. You need employees. You need equipment. You need time. You need resources. This is where one of America's greatest advantages appears: venture capital. Imagine a room full of investors, thousands of them, all searching for the same thing: the next breakthrough, the next giant company, the next billion-dollar opportunity, the next future-changing innovation. Now, imagine hundreds of entrepreneurs entering that room, each with an idea, each with a dream, each competing for investment. What happens? The strongest opportunities attract attention. The strongest teams receive funding. The strongest ideas get a chance to grow. Competition begins long before a company reaches customers. It begins the moment someone asks for capital. This system changed everything, because now failure wasn't necessarily the end. An entrepreneur could fail, learn, try again, raise money again, build again, compete again. America created an environment where experimentation became possible at scale, and when millions of experiments happen, extraordinary discoveries eventually emerge. Most fail. Some survive. A few transform the world. The math is surprisingly simple. Imagine 10,000 startups. 9,500 fail. 400 survive. 90 succeed. 10 become giants. Those 10 companies can generate trillions of dollars, millions of jobs, entire industries. That's the hidden power of competition. You don't need everyone to win. You only need enough winners to change the future. Now imagine this process repeating year after year, decade after decade, generation after generation. The result becomes enormous. But perhaps the most underrated effect of competition is productivity. Productivity sounds boring. It's not. In fact, productivity may be the single biggest reason nations become rich. Imagine two workers, both work 8 hours. One produces 10 units, The other produces 20. Who creates more value? Obviously, the second worker. Now imagine an entire economy becoming more productive. Factories produce more. Software automates tasks. Machines increase efficiency. Transportation becomes faster. Communication becomes instant. The same amount of effort creates more output. That's productivity. And competition relentlessly pushes businesses toward it. Because inefficient companies struggle. Efficient companies survive. Imagine running a company. Your competitor discovers a way to cut costs by 20%. What happens? You either improve or you lose market share. Competition forces adaptation. Adaptation increases productivity. Productivity increases wealth. Over decades, the effect becomes enormous. Most people never notice these improvements. They happen quietly, one innovation at a time, one process at a time, one efficiency gain at a time. But eventually, the results become impossible to ignore. Living standards rise, products improve, services improve, technology improves, the economy grows. This is one reason America became extraordinarily wealthy, not because it worked harder than everyone else, but because competition constantly pushed the system toward greater efficiency. Yet perhaps the most fascinating part of the story involves globalization, because eventually American companies realized something incredible. Their market wasn't just America. Their market was the world. Imagine building a company in New York. For most of history, your customers would be nearby, maybe your state, maybe your country. Today, your customers might live anywhere. Europe, Asia, Africa, South America, Australia. Every connected device becomes a potential customer. The scale is unprecedented, and competition expands accordingly. Now, you're not just competing against local businesses. You're competing against the best companies on Earth. At first, this sounds dangerous, and it is. Many companies fail. Many industries struggle. But the companies that survive become incredibly strong, because surviving global competition requires excellence. Average isn't enough. Good isn't enough. You need to be world-class. And when thousands of companies pursue world-class performance simultaneously, the economy becomes stronger. This process helped create some of the largest corporations in human history, companies serving billions of people, platforms connecting entire continents, technologies used by nearly everyone on Earth. The scale became almost unimaginable. But here's the irony. The bigger competition became, the bigger opportunities became, because global markets create global rewards, and global rewards attract even more competition. The cycle accelerates once again. However, the most important part of this story has nothing to do with technology, nothing to do with venture capital, nothing to do with Wall Street, nothing to do with artificial intelligence. It's something much deeper, a mindset, a belief system, a culture. Because competition only works when people believe improvement is possible. Imagine a society where nobody believes they can succeed. Nobody starts businesses. Nobody takes risks. Nobody innovates. Nobody experiments. Competition disappears. Progress slows. Growth fades. Now imagine the opposite. A society where millions of people believe tomorrow can be better than today. Millions of entrepreneurs. Millions of inventors. Millions of dreamers. Millions of ambitious individuals, all trying to build something better. That's where competition becomes powerful, because competition is really organized optimism. It's millions of people simultaneously attempting to improve the future. Most fail, but failure isn't the point. The point is trying. The point is experimenting. The point is discovering what works. America spent centuries building a culture that often rewards experimentation. Not perfectly, not always fairly, but consistently enough to create extraordinary results. And over time, those results transformed the nation. Yet one final piece of the puzzle remains, one invisible force that may be even more important than competition itself, a force that determines whether competition creates prosperity or chaos, a force that investors watch carefully, entrepreneurs depend on, businesses require, and economies cannot function without trust, because competition alone doesn't build wealth. Competition must operate in a system people trust, and once trust enters the story, everything changes. Trust. It sounds simple, almost boring. Yet trust may be one of the most valuable economic assets ever created. Imagine entering a competition where nobody follows the rules. Contracts mean nothing. Promises mean nothing. Property can disappear overnight. Businesses can be taken without warning. Would you invest? Would you start a company? Would you risk your savings? Probably not, because competition only creates prosperity when people trust the system around it. Think about a simple transaction. You buy a product. The seller expects payment. You expect delivery. Neither side knows the future, yet the transaction happens. Why? Trust. Now imagine billions of transactions. Every day, every hour, every second. Trust becomes the invisible foundation supporting the entire economy. And for generations, America developed institutions that made many people believe the system was relatively predictable. Not perfect. No country is. Mistakes happen. Crises happen. Recessions happen. But investors generally believed something important. The rules tomorrow would look similar to the rules today. That belief changed everything, because money follows trust. Always. Investors send capital where they feel secure. Entrepreneurs build where they feel protected. Businesses expand where they feel confident. Trust attracts opportunity. Opportunity attracts talent. Talent attracts innovation. Innovation attracts growth. The cycle continues. And once trust combines with competition, the results can become extraordinary. Imagine two entrepreneurs. Both have the same idea. Both have the same skills. Both have the same ambition. But one operates in a system people trust. The other doesn't. Which entrepreneur attracts investors? Which entrepreneur hires employees? Which entrepreneur grows faster? The answer is obvious. Trust multiplies the power of competition, and America spent centuries building systems that allowed competition to operate at massive scale. But there's another reason competition became so powerful: ownership. Because competing feels different when you own something. Imagine working for a company. Now imagine owning part of that company. Your perspective changes immediately. Success matters more. Growth matters more. Innovation matters more, because you participate in the outcome. This idea transformed America. Millions of people became owners. Owners of homes, owners of stocks, owners of businesses, owners of intellectual property, owners of assets, and ownership creates incentives. When people benefit from growth, they become more willing to support growth. When people participate in success, they become more invested in success. This created one of the largest ownership systems in human history. Millions of Americans didn't just work inside the economy, they owned pieces of it. And that ownership connected ordinary people to economic growth in ways previous generations could barely imagine. But perhaps the most powerful force of all wasn't trust. It wasn't ownership. It wasn't even competition itself. It was belief. The belief that improvement is possible. Think about every major breakthrough in history. At first, somebody doubted it. The automobile, the airplane, the computer, the internet, the smartphone, artificial intelligence. Every revolutionary idea began as something uncertain, something risky, something many people believed would fail. Yet someone pursued it anyway, because they believed the future could be different from the present. That belief matters more than most people realize, because competition begins with imagination. Before a company exists, someone imagines it. Before an invention exists, someone imagines it. Before an industry exists, someone imagines it. Progress starts as an idea, and competition determines which ideas survive. This is why modern America became such an extraordinary economic experiment. Millions of people pursuing millions of possibilities. Not because success was guaranteed, because it wasn't. Most failed. Many struggled. Some lost everything, but enough succeeded to transform the nation. And that's the part many people misunderstand. America didn't become wealthy because every entrepreneur won. America became wealthy because the system allowed enough winners to emerge. Think about Silicon Valley. Most startups fail, yet the region continues producing extraordinary innovation. Why? Because a single success can outweigh hundreds of failures. One breakthrough can create billions. One platform can connect billions of people. One technology can transform entire industries. Competition isn't about avoiding failure. It's about discovering success. And success can be incredibly valuable. Now, zoom out. Imagine 200 years of this process. Generation after generation. Entrepreneurs competing. Inventors competing. Businesses competing. Cities competing. States competing. Ideas competing relentlessly. Day after day. Year after year. Decade after decade. What emerges? Not just economic growth. Economic evolution. America didn't become modern overnight. It evolved. The agricultural era gave way to the industrial era. The industrial era gave way to manufacturing. Manufacturing gave way to technology. Technology gave way to digital platforms. And now the digital age is giving way to artificial intelligence. Every transition created winners. Every transition created losers. Every transition created new opportunities. And competition accelerated each transformation. Yet here's something fascinating. The greatest competitors weren't always the strongest. They weren't always the richest. They weren't always the biggest. Often they were simply the most adaptable. Because competition rewards adaptation. The world changes. Technology changes. Consumer preferences change. Markets change. The competitors who adapt survive. The competitors who refuse disappear. This lesson applies to individuals. It applies to companies. It applies to entire nations. And perhaps that's the most important lesson of all, because the future isn't waiting. Artificial intelligence is changing industries. Automation is changing jobs. Global markets are evolving. New competitors are emerging. The next generation of economic battles has already begun. Some companies will dominate. Others will disappear. Some technologies will reshape society. Others will be forgotten. The cycle continues, just as it always has. And once again, competition will decide much of the outcome. But now we arrive at the final question. Did competition build modern America? Or did modern America build competition? The truth is, both happened simultaneously. Competition shaped the system. The system encouraged competition. Together they reinforced each other, creating a powerful feedback loop that generated innovation, productivity, investment, and growth. Not perfectly, not without challenges, not without failures, but powerfully enough to transform a nation. That's why competition matters. Not because it guarantees success, not because it eliminates failure, but because it continuously pushes people, companies, and societies toward improvement. And over long periods of time, improvement compounds. Small improvements become major breakthroughs. Major breakthroughs become industries. Industries become wealth. Wealth funds the next generation of innovation. The cycle continues, again and again and again. For more than 2 centuries, that cycle helped shape the United States. It built railroads. It built factories. It built skyscrapers. It built Silicon Valley. It built the internet economy. It built some of the most valuable companies in human history. And perhaps most importantly, it built a culture that never stops asking one simple question: can this be done better? Because the moment people stop asking that question, progress slows, competition fades, innovation weakens, growth disappears. But as long as millions of people continue asking it, new ideas will emerge, new industries will appear, new fortunes will be created, and new chapters of economic history will be written. That's the hidden story of modern America. Not a story about luck, not a story about resources, not a story about geography, but a story about competition. the invisible force that transformed ambition into innovation, innovation into industries, and industries into one of the most powerful economies the world has ever seen. And as the next technological revolution begins, one question remains unanswered. Will competition continue to fuel America's future? Or is the world about to witness an even greater race than anything we've seen before? The answer is still being written, right now, by the competitors building tomorrow.